The African Union of Carthage in Morocco, also known as the African Union, or AU for short, was a union between two countries which were the West African Union and the African Union. They eventually split back into two countries. The African Union controlled coastline on the Mediterranean Sea to the north and the Atlantic Ocean to the west. The country fell apart in the Civil War in episode 36. The African Union became more unstable. The African Union was formed in episode 21 as a west-east coast country that wanted a better economy and access to the sea. Later in its civil war, the Red Team, later also known as Libya, wanted that piece of Libyan land that they claimed. The old empire got word that Libya could sell nukes to the old empire's enemies. The Republic of Carthage was a country in North Africa born after the First North African War. It was considered the successor of the African Union. The country during the Cold War and World War III was Old Empire line, but did not join the Square Alliance. It met its demise in the Second North African War. The formation in the early conflicts, the Mediterranean African country, originally known as the Light Blue Country, emerged following the secession from the Dark Blue Egyptian country after its breakaway from the Red Team in episode 3. This led to a rebellion in Sicily that rapidly spread across western North Africa, ultimately forming an independent state. Over the subsequent episodes, the light blue country expanded into Iberia and North Africa, though Sicily was eventually taken by the purple team. Wars and expansion. In episode 7, a major war erupted between the purple team and the light blue country, resulting in the loss of Iberian territories, which were divided between the purple team and the dark cyan team. The light blue country engaged in another war with the purple team during the Great Plague, but much of the historical evidence from this conflict was lost. By episode 10, the country suffered another territorial loss as a Senegal colony declared independence. This was followed by the loss of Morocco in episode 11. The Triangle Alliance in World War Zero. In episode 13, the purple team declared war on the light blue team for the third time, which have formed an alliance with the dark cyan team and the dark purple team, also known as the Triangle Alliance. The war, later referred to as World War Zero, saw the purple team launch 2 invasions in Tunisia, but was eventually pushed out. After a prolonged conflict, the light blue team emerged victorious, regaining Sicily and Sardinia in the peace treaty. The red team invasion. During red team's rapid rampage in episode 17, the light blue country was invaded, with its capital falling to the enemy forces. Despite initial successes, the red team was eventually repelled back to Levant, resulting in a treaty where the light blue country gains its territories, but without any additional gains. Unification. In episode 21, after years of minor expansions, the light blue country united with Morocco to officially form the African Union. Colonization in the Triangle Coalition conflicts. Following its unification, the African Union embarked on exploration and colonization efforts in South America, but its colonies later declared independence when the dark cyan team and the dark purple team started colonizing Africa. The African Union left the Triangle Coalition and attempted to preserve as much African land as possible, particularly in the Sahara. However, they failed to secure all their desired territory. World War II. In World War One, my bad. World War One and World War II, the African Union remained neutral during World War One, but in World War II, it declared war on the Triangle Coalition, launching invasions into the Dark Cyan team and Italian Union colonies in Africa. It also directly invaded the Italian Union and the Dark Cyan team, successfully besieging their capitals. The African Union made strategic naval landings in the Balearic Islands, linking up with other landing forces despite facing counteroffensive. The Dark Cyan team's capital fell, forcing them into retreat. With the Old Empire also advancing, the Triangle Coalition began collapsing. The Dark Cyan team attempted a conscription drive to push the African Union out of Iberia, but ultimately failed. When China entered the war, the Dark Cyan team was reinstated and surrendered. In the post-war treaty, the African Union gained Corsica, parts of Libya, and coastal Dark Cyan territories, while most of the Dark Cyan team became an African puppet state. Civil War and dissolution, the First North African War, African Union Civil War. The conflict began when the West African Union succeeded from the late African Union in episode 35 and 36, went from a peaceful breakup to a full war as West African Union occupied what was technically still land of the African Union. West Africa refused to withdraw and the war began. It was a resounding defeat for the now East African Union as it had to give up a lot more land to West Africa and give independence back to the Dark Cyan team. This meant the East African Union had gone from one of the strongest countries on earth to an irrelevant state in North Africa, even being forced to relinquish all its nuclear research to the old empire due to fear of a country like Libya seizing it. Following the Civil War, several territorial changes occurred. The Lime Italian team took Corsica, the Dark Purple team took the Balearic Islands, the old empire seized Sicily. The African Union officially split, ending its status as a unified state. The Cold War and the War of the Greats. For a while, the East African Union was largely irrelevant, although the West African Union had joined the Cross Alliance with Russia. The East African Union, despite leaning toward the old empire, decided not to join the Square Alliance. They didn't join during the War of the Greats either, as following the First North African War, it was severely weakened and not ready for a war of such size. Near the end of the war, the old empire tried pressuring the East African Union to join, only to be denied. Age of Aggression. The Age of Aggression would become what marked the end of the East African Union. It had become the beacon of democracy in Africa, as more and more countries on the continent turned to fascism, most notably the 2006 president election in the West African Union saw a fascist leader supported by the Pan-Grand Alliance won the election and turned the country into Africa's fourth fascist dictatorship. The new leader of the West African Union in his inaugural address declared his intention to right the wrongs of the previous government and announced his plans to reunite the African Union under his regime. Soon the West African military was ready and the invasion of the East African Union began. The Second North African War would see Libya join on the side of the West African Union. West Africa was already much stronger than the East African Union at this point, and Libya had help from the fascist gold country with refining its military. In short, the East African Union stood no chance. Even the Pro team intervened in occupying Sardinia. Upon the fall of Tunis, the war ended and the Treaty of Tunis was signed. The East African Union from there ceased to exist, with most of it going to the new African Union, plus other lands going to Libya. Legacy. The East African Union was the successor of the African Union, the country that spearheaded the liberation of Africa from European colonialism. Now with it destroyed by its fascist neighbors, the last hope for African democracy has fallen. If you like this video and the little bloopers that I did throughout the episode from the video, if you like it, like and subscribe please, it will help me out a lot. And if you don't, just like it and don't subscribe to me. Yeah, I won't mind if you dislike. Me getting dislikes will make my content improve. Trust me on that. But anyways, this is all for this video and see you in the next one. And the first one I did, the history of Rome, didn't get that much views, so please advertise this. I worked hard, like an hour-ish on it. I worked like a couple hours on each history of blank. Yeah. My second one, and again, in Rome and the African Union I got from the wicso wiki. So yeah, I pretty much read everything on the wicso wiki, and shout out to them. So yeah, this is everything for this video, and goodbye.